What is up, my Sabronis? It is a beautiful Saturday, August 8th. High school football season really hit it off last night with some scrimmages get going. As always, I am Taylor Sabo. I have Scott Cam Dog Cameron with us, and today we have a very, 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 very special guest joining us because of the high school football season, and that is the one and only Drew Pasteur. Uh, Runs the Ohio Fantastic 50 page. If you are a high school sports fan, Ohio high school football fan specifically, you've been on this website, you've seen the rankings, you've seen all the data behind it, and so we are very blessed to be joined by Drew today, just to kind of talk about all the science that goes behind the numbers within Ohio high school football. So Drew, thank you for joining us. We appreciate having you on.
Great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
So just kind of getting into it, you are originally from North Carolina. How did you get into transition to Ohio and then getting into Ohio high school football?
Yeah, I know that's an unusual direction to make that move, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
there's maybe more Ohioans in the Carolinas than there are in Ohio now.
Mm-hmm.
But I started out as a high school teacher and coach in the late 90s down in the Raleigh area. And in those early days, it was the football BCS, two-team playoff basically in college football. And so computer rankings were becoming a big thing. This is before
Mm-hmm.
Moneyball and all of that. But math guys and engineers and whatever thinking about ranking college football teams. And I started thinking about the fact in North Carolina we had four classes at the time, and you didn't see so much of playing between the big schools and the small schools. But I started wondering, well, what would happen if we had this small school that's absolutely dominant? Think of like a Marion Local or a Kirtland or somebody like that, play against a pretty good public school that was a lot bigger. Of what might that look like? And I came up with the idea of an all classes top 50 ranking, and started out, with the Sunday newspaper that had all the scores in the state and an Excel spreadsheet, and trying to put this stuff together using 90s technology. And eventually, a couple of newspapers got interested, a big high school sports website, and so on. I started doing rankings and then predictions of playoff brackets and individual games, this kind of thing. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years. During that time, I left my position as a high school teacher and head athletic trainer, went back to graduate school and got my PhD in applied math at NC State. And after that, I'm looking for a small college kind of setting to teach in. And I ended up getting a great spot at College of Worcester up in Ohio's Amish country. Never been
Mm-hmm.
within 200 miles of the place before that. But after 18 years, it feels a lot like home now.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
when I came to Ohio, I sort of knew high school football was substantial there. I follow the national scene enough to have some idea. I've heard of Massillon, McKinley, and I get up here and I start thinking, okay, there's a computer point system. Well, that works really nicely with stuff that I do, right? If Harbin points, it's very cut and dried of who's going to be where at the end of the season. You can predict games and this kind of thing. I thought, okay, I'll do this in Ohio too. And the first year I had 10 times the traffic on my website that I'd ever had in North Carolina. It's just, high school football is a big deal in a lot of communities here.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a really natural thing. And this is year number 19, I guess, for doing this in Ohio now. So it's been a lot of fun being involved with the coaches and the media and so on, and staying connected to the game, even though I'm not in the sidelines anymore like I used to be when I was an athletic trainer for a program.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Ohio high school football. I moved here when I was in fourth grade, moved to Galleon, and just the Friday night feeling here. You think of like Georgia, Texas, California, and then I feel like Ohio's got to be in that top five. Of just it means something to the not just to the players and the coaches, but the community. And my wife kind of jokes sometimes like it's a 7 day a week job right now as a coach. Like when Sunday we meet on Sundays and stuff, she's kind of like it's too much, too much, too much. But it's when Ohio high school football, like it's different than some of those other states sometimes. So it's really cool to hear just how much like you come over here in the traffic for how you do things, just the hit that it is instantly. So just kind of let's talk about like going into this year. As August rolls around, JoeIdle.com gets updated with the schedules and stuff, and you guys are pretty much hand in hand with once his stuff was updated, yours was updated. How does the rankings every year reset based on previous year's data?
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to Joe on that. I'm in regular communication with him and with Bruce Monin, who runs a similar site in the southeast part of the state during the season. I am not a computer scientist by background. Okay, I can code a little bit and more than I used to with AI tools and things now, but
Mm,
Joe's a computer scientist, so he's got a lot of things put together along with a lot of work on the ground to be able to get scores out of some of these last rural areas where, 2 a.m. he's still pulling in scores every Friday night. He
mm-hmm.
has been kind to give me a back door into being able to pull his data easily. And so when he's pulling scores at 1:30 in the morning, right, I can be asleep and my website pull in scores and run the numbers and post it all. And I get up next morning and see, yep, okay, great, it all ran. Being in my 50s, I'm not the night owl that I once was, and maybe at the end of the season. But so Joe makes things really easy for me on that end of getting all the data. Couldn't really do what I do without him or somebody else pulling that kind of data. In terms of resetting from one season to the next, a couple of years ago, I went back and used 20 years of data to look at some of the underlying components of my model. And what I found is about a 75-25 split of the last two seasons is what works best to start the new one. So mostly your team's going to be ranked where they finished last year, but with a little bit of looking at the prior year to that. What's missing and why the predictions aren't very good the first week is I've got no idea, right, that your 3,000-yard passer from last year is now wearing scarlet and gray,
Right.
or that you return 19 starters, or the coach left, or whatever else. I don't know any of that stuff. For 700 teams, you just can't keep up with it all. There was one time when I at least got from a national website how many starters everybody had coming back and the degree to which they had major college talent. That was more than I could do, and a lot of it got paywalled eventually anyway. So it's just recognizing, yeah, the numbers aren't going to be real good the first week. Come back in about 3 or 4 weeks if you want to gripe and moan over the fact that I've got you ranked lower or too high or whatever. Honestly, if it were just me, I'd probably wait about 3 weeks to put anything up. I did that at one time, and people kept saying, "Drew, when are you going to have stuff up? I want to see what have you got in week one." All right, all right. It's not perfect, but it's a starting point. And then by about week four, you get a pretty good idea of both what's it going to take to get you into the playoffs or a home game. And midway through the season, honestly, you got a pretty good sense between the games that are already in the books and what the schedule is left. I could probably pick 90% of the playoff teams halfway through the season, and for half or more of them be within one or two seed lines of where they're going to end up. The schedule tells you a lot, right? This is not the NFL where the worst team has a decent chance of beating the best team in a given week.
Right.
It's you get a lot more mismatches, and the strength of schedule is kind of baked in at that point. So midway through the season, there's a lot of things that you already know.
Yeah. Scott and I, we talk, we do mostly college football and NFL, and then of those two, mostly college football. We always kind of talk about like we hate preseason rankings because it's like it's for ESPN and Big Ten to 1 versus 2 or 2 versus 5 or whatever. And so you said that you really would rather wait 3 or 4 weeks for people to do it. Do you get a lot of, you said people griping about it. Do you get a lot of people just like on Twitter or whatever, like, hey, why is my team so, after like week 4, week 5, week 6, you get a good decent
Yeah,
amount of that?
after 25 years in the business, you just sort of understand that comes with the territory of,
Mm-hmm.
and there's things of, right, there is no perfect ranking. The one that I get later in the season is, oh, you have this team ranked below this team, but they beat them. Okay, well, great. One of the things I learned years ago from another scientist in the business looking at college football, there is no ranking where you can have every team above the teams that it beat and below the teams that it didn't. The best you can do is have about 90% of the games right on
Mm-hmm.
that because there are upsets, right? What do you do when the 2-7 team beats the 8-1 team? You can't put them over the top of them, or there's a bunch of other games that aren't going to make any sense. So you do the best that you can with that stuff, and my system is designed to be predictive. It's not about who beat who, it's about giving the best predictions for future games. And once we get a few games in, it's pretty good at that. I mean, A few weeks in, we're going to see 85 to 90% of the games picked correctly, and that sort of thing. So that's really what it's tuned for, trying to be able to look ahead to playoffs and other things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have a question here. So you're talking about obviously the greater the sample size, you have a better mode of prediction, etc. Have you ever had a moment? You said week 4 to 6 you start getting a better predictive input. Have you ever had something where it just completely upheaved and turned a 180 and you're like, wow, that came out of nowhere? I mean, there's a lot of factors, injuries and things that could play into that, but have you ever had something where you had an instance where, wow, that totally didn't go how I thought it would go?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the reality is, right, when there's 300 and some games every week there is something shocking that happens even late in the season, a 4 touchdown underdog that pulls off a major upset or this kind of thing. We saw something really interesting in our own town a few years ago. The first year of the expanded playoffs to 16, Worcester High snuck in as a 14 seed, and then they went and pulled off road upsets back to back weeks. They were the lowest seed in the state left at that point, and maybe the only double digit seed even after a couple of weeks of playoffs. I got to tell you, after watching that team all season, I sure didn't see it coming, but it was fun.
Sometimes when you're hot, right? It's sometimes better to be hot than good, and that train keeps rolling. Yeah, absolutely. I guess maybe another follow-up question. You were talking about, kids graduating, things happening. How much does open enrollment play into being able to calculate? The big story in Ohio is Jameer Brown going back to Huber Heights and things. How does stuff like that factor into predictive inputs?
I'm not sure that it has any more effect than just the natural turnover of seniors graduating and underclassmen coming up. And right, the biggest programs just reload year after year. The fact is their second string are better than a lot of other teams' first string. But for some programs you lose one or two key players and it's a real big shift. Of course somebody like that is a game changer, but the all I'm looking at is the scores and the schedules. And you know what? Once we get about 3, 4 games in, that's going to show up on both ends of where he was and where he is now. It was the same kind of thing a few years ago when we had a player here in Wayne County that was a big time running back, Markel Parks at Orville, and ran for 2,500 yards or something one year. And when he didn't come back the next, that's a real shift, especially at the D5 level. But those kinds of things are happening somewhere every year, so all you can do is give it a few games, and generally it'll sort of work itself out.
You have last year you kind of had something now about your preseason rankings and the Associated Press preseason rankings. You last year I think you said you finished 15-6 in your favor. Are you doing that again this year? The 4th annual AP F50 challenge?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't run it at preseason, but when the first AP poll comes out to look at their top 10 and their top team in every region against my own, I think the challenge sometimes for the media writers is really getting a sense of the strength of schedule differences. Again, this is not like the NFL or even college football. There is just a huge difference where the team that's 1-2 and has played an elite schedule may be multiple touchdowns better than the 3-0 team, and without really digging deeply into the data. And to be fair to the folks at the AP, right, there's 700 teams across the whole state. I can't keep up with any of that by memory or hand. I think it's just tough to pick that out, and that's where I feel like in some ways a computer ranking has a chance to get a handle on that stuff a little earlier in the season. I appreciate all the media folks, whether online like y'all or the traditional media with TV stations and newspapers. The state's just too big and got too many teams to really be able to keep up with that at a broad level, especially once you get outside of your local area or below the high profile handful of teams in every division that are at the top. For sure, preseason in a local area, right, y'all in mid-Ohio or somebody Houseworth with Cincinnati Enquirer, what y'all have a lot better idea than I do of what these first 2 or 3 teams are going to look like. The data helps narrow that gap pretty quickly, but if I had y'all picking, Toledo games, right, or somebody out of Cincinnati trying to look at the West Virginia border, it's like, man, I got no idea. You look at the record, well, gee, this team's 3-0, and they've outscored their opponents 190 to 14. They look pretty good. Well, they do until you realize just how bad those three opponents are. Or,
Yeah.
So I do have a question because you brought that up, the West Virginia thing, the border teams. There's a team last year, Martins Ferry. They played only 9 games that counted towards their ranking, and they missed a playoff spot by 1 spot. Now, and I think what happened last year is they were supposed to play a team in Huntington, and something happened, so they had to fill up the schedule with the team that didn't count for the 10th game for week 1, and so they ended up only playing 9 games. When something like that happens, how do you calculate that in and do it fairly? Is that a hard thing to do?
it is in terms of, I mean, from my end, if they're playing somebody that I can't tell what the strength of that opponent is, like that West Virginia school, then you just ignore it. There was a time when I used to try to pull in non-Ohio teams' rankings from CalPrep's big national website, and I could take their rankings, convert them onto my scale. That's all paywalled now, so I have to just ignore those out-of-state games. And if you're somebody that's playing 3, 4, 5, 6 out-of-state games, right, that's a lot of data missing. I can still put them in terms of playoff position of how are they going to be rated into the Harbin points. But the fewer games you've got, it's tough. As I look at Ferry's schedule last year, they were kind of in a tough spot of they lose to Independence, who ends up winning 10 games. They lose to Wheeling Central Catholic, who wins 10 games. And you look at the teams they beat. Well, Bel Air was 3-7. Cambridge went 0 for the season. Buckeye Local 2-8. Uniontown, Pennsylvania 2-8. They beat Malvern, who went 7-5, and they beat Lucas, who was 5-6. They lose to Edison, who's a fairly average team. That year, sometimes it's just the schedule didn't stack up the right way, and the way that the Harbin points work out, it's not just how many games you win, but it's which ones you win. You're better off to pull off a big upset and then take an ugly loss to a weak team than the other way around, because the points are all on beating good teams. Losing to bad teams doesn't really hurt you. Now, in my system, it does. I would argue at some level we ought to be looking at not only who did you beat, but who did you lose to. But that's not the way the system works. So, yeah, sometimes there are teams that I think, gee, they may not have quite gotten a fair shake out of that. Likewise, you get the team that's stuck in a conference that's terrible, and they've just got poor opponent after poor opponent there. There's only so much you can do with your 2 or 3 non-conference games to rectify that, right? I think it was Gibsonburg that got shut out undefeated, and there was the Newcomerstown case in 2002. There's the occasional one under the old 8-team playoffs that went 10-0, where now you could see, it's not out of the question, you could see a 9-1 team get shut out, even with 12-team schedule, if they're in a strong region and they their schedule's on the weaker side. You lose the wrong one game and you might not get in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead, Scott.
Well, my last year at Bucyrus, we went 9-1, and we lost to Winford, who was a powerhouse at the time, and we missed the playoffs. It was the old 8-team system, and even consequently, also, I remember when the first year of the expanded playoffs, Pleasant had a team that was not very good, and I think they went 1-9 that year, or maybe 2-8. But their one win, they beat Marion Harding, a couple divisions higher, and that gave them just enough points where they snuck in the playoffs. They got killed, but yeah, you're right. It's who you beat, and it's better to upset someone and still suck, and you can sneak in somehow. Yeah.
It's...
And I was just gonna say real quick. I think that in the Ohio high school model, when I played, it was still 8. When Scott was in school, I'm surprised they even had a tournament. I'm surprised they just do based on champion voting on it. But and then my second year was the COVID year, and so it was kind of everybody. And then they're like, hey, 16, and so my third year coaching, we were 16, and there was one year we're the 15 seed, and we go to we go to Clyde, and it's an ugly night for high school football. It's like nobody wants to see these teams that are scraping in. Obviously, last year with the 12-year model, the first time, we enjoyed it. We ended up being the second seed in Region 14, right behind Shelby, after being 9-1, and we got that first week bye. It was real cool for us as a staff. We went and watched, scouted who we were going to play. To get 2 home games in a row, then it was a really cool setup, and I think it's one that I think has helped. It helped the sport because 16 just felt off. As far as your thoughts on the playoff system, how much do you like now versus 16?
Yeah, I have seen playoffs in different states. I've been involved with high school football in North Carolina, which used a district type system for a long time of your top 2 or 3 or whatever. In Florida, which is kind of similar, 2 out of every group of 5 or 6, and up here, I think Ohio has a really nice model in some ways that, while there are things I would change about the Harvin point system, overall it's pretty good. It's better than what most states have. Given the number of teams that get in, I guess the balance I want to see is anybody that's got a realistic shot to win a title ought to be in. But you want it to be an accomplishment of some kind to make the playoffs. That, hey, we made playoffs this year. I remember being in high school and in North Carolina at the time, I think it was about a third of the teams made it. Not shocking if you look at me. I did not play high school football at a public school of 2,400 kids. I kept stats on the sidelines, and my sophomore year we made playoffs at 5-5, and that was a big deal. Just to sneak in. Did we win a game? No. And they expanded it eventually. I've kind of seen both sides of it, I guess. I remember when I was an athletic trainer one year, we won a game on the last game of the season to get into one of these situations where 3 coaches meet up somewhere to be able to draw straws for who gets the last berth from our league, and we got it. We were the 16 seed in a 16-team bracket at, I don't know, 3-7 or 4-6 or something. So we had to go play number 1 on the road, and you go in there and you look at these kids and it's like, oh my gosh. It looked like we were going to play a small college team. Well, the game ended up 10-7, and we had a potential game-winning pass fall off, go off somebody's fingertips. We were right there. And I thought, okay, maybe this is all right to have this number of teams in the playoffs. A couple of years later, after another expansion, I think we were 2-8 and had to go play one of the regional powers in the area. And I remember a kid getting a broken leg where we were just completely physically overmatched. It was like 55-7. And I thought, gee, we really should have just had the season over a week earlier. In my opinion, 16 is too many. I think 8 was almost perfect. The thing that I liked about 8, where it was about a third of the teams getting in, is it was just right. It meant something to make the playoffs, but there weren't a whole lot of teams that could make a realistic claim of being a regional contender that didn't get in. Maybe there's the team, right, that went 6-4 against a brutal schedule and they come up just a little short, or 8-2 against a not so great schedule. There were some that had some legitimate gripes, but overall I really liked 8. The only thing with 12 is that coaches seem to be mixed on the having a bye. Right, if you're in a routine, you know what it's like. Monday film, go hard and practice Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday's a walkthrough. Friday night you play. And when you get that routine broken up with the bye week, I don't know. Sometimes that can be a challenge. Can be good to heal up a little bit, or it can be not so good to lose your sharpness.
Yeah, it was. I mean, definitely an interesting thing for us at Galleon last year. We really spent a good weekend just kind of what do we want to do with the plan, and I thought it ended up working well for us. Our first game that postseason, that it went in our favor, but it was definitely a debate on how do we do it to do it right to best put our kids in a good position. And I could tell you this: it might be if we got a top 4 seed this year, we might do it completely different. Like we nobody has the answer, especially after just 1 year doing it. But I think that the setup is real cool. I got another question for you. So obviously Worcester is your where you reside and everything, and you, it seems like every Friday you're attending Worcester games. But are there other teams within just the area, or teams that, since you've been doing this data for so long, that you do follow and kind of maybe not root for, but if you do root for them or like to see them succeed?
Yeah, I
And
like
you
to
can
get
say
out
the
to
Galleon
see.
Tigers 100%. The Galleon Tigers is a great answer.
You know what? There's a lot of great football being played in Mid Ohio. I have not gotten over there to a game. I've given talks at high schools and this kind of thing over in your area, and got to talk to student athlete leaders from 3 or 4 high schools over in a couple of years ago over that way. Boy, that'd be fun to in the playoffs get over there. But during the regular season, I don't get out a whole lot. I've got 2 boys. One is at Ohio State now, and one is at Worcester High. And while they're athletes in other sports, both of them played in the band on Friday night, so I'm often at our games. But occasionally, if we're on the road, and especially if it's one of those of, yeah, this is not going to end well, then I go see a Wayne County Athletic League game, or somebody else. I've been over to Massillon a couple times. I like watching whether it's Dalton or Hillsdale or Northwestern, some of the small school, excuse me, Norway, some of the small school powers in our area. That's fun to get out and watch a game where you got a completely packed out stadium and different kind of atmosphere. So yeah, I like going out to see a good football game. The only challenge that gets into November, I've been up here almost 20 years, but man, I'm a thin-blooded Southerner, and there's just only so much stuff. I put on everything I own, and I'm still shivering by the second quarter. So don't quite make it out to as many of those snowy November and December games I once did.
Scott, you got anything real quick? I got 2 more big ones for you.
Well, we were talking about upsets happening, and how many teams get into the playoffs, and 8 seems poetically great and everything, and it kind of reminded me of one year when Marion Harding made the playoffs, and they played a school called Green. I'd never heard of Green in my life, and they were just like us. And all of a sudden, they went to the state finals, and they were a pretty low-seeded team. So, again, sometimes, in my experiences of playing sports and stuff, it oftentimes, as weird as it is, it's better to be hot than good. That being said, I work for the OH Report, and I call a lot of KMAC games. That's the Knox-Morrow County Athletic Conference. And, smaller schools. And we had some really good teams last year that I thought, Fredericktown made the playoffs, Centerburg made the playoffs, Mount Gilead was a great team, Danville is always obviously great. But, some of these schools like Centerburg and stuff, when they came up to play teams from their own region or just different geographic areas, they kind of hit a brick wall. Do you ever see where, you ever look at a number 1 or number 2 or 3 team in a region, and you're like, oh, that team, they may be really highly ranked, but if they played this number 7 team over here in this hot rank or in this hot region, they would beat them. Do you ever think that?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's times even as you get down to the end of the regular season, you can pick out a team that's going to be highly seeded, but maybe it's a team, right, that's going to be 9-1 coming out of a really weak league. Sometimes those are some of your urban inner city conferences, like in Columbus or Cleveland. And you see, I know Worcester High has been in Region 7 for a while, and as you've got Massillon and others are in there, you're looking at, please, can we draw the Columbus City League team? Like that we might win. If we go to Massillon, we're just hoping to come out in one piece. So yeah, there are times like that you can pick out a team that's probably overseeded because they've won a bunch of games. And high school football, you get a lot of conference games. You get an 8-team league, right? Teams are piling up enough wins internally that even if they've kind of struggled out of league, there's still some points to be gained by beating a very mediocre 6-4 opponent in some of those cases. So I think that's just the nature of playing on average 7 conference games in a 10-team schedule, is you're going to see some teams that are over or underrated. I was talking with somebody about college basketball scheduling a while back and said, it's a whole lot easier to play the best team out of a bad conference than to play a middle-of-the-road team out of a really good conference, and you're going to get more value in all of the whatever rankings are being applied for beating the team that's got a good record, even if they're their strength of schedule wasn't so good. And I think the same thing applies here. Right, give me the top team out of the Cleveland Senate League, or well, I take that back, Glenville. Right, let's remove Glenville, but a top team out of a weak league, rather than going to play somebody like the third or fourth place team out of the MAC. I want no part of that. If you're picking.
Speaking of upsets, so last year, just off the top of my head in our area, I know like for us, we going into week one, we were 19-point dogs to St. Mary's, and our kids, they get all around that. But Highland had a big upset over Clear Fork. Clear Fork had a big upset over Perkins week one. But last year's number one upset was Washington versus Granville. It was 42 points. What is the biggest upset that you've seen in your data since you've been doing all this?
Yeah, anything over 40 is pretty uncommon. The way my numbers work right now, there's a time that you get teams playing each other where one team is probably 60, 70, 80 points better than the other. Thankfully, most coaches are not going to keep it in and try to keep throwing the ball or have the first string running back just mauling people or whatever. So once you get a margin over about 3 or 4 touchdowns, my system is going to cut that down based on historical data. If you're 50 points better than the opponent, all right, that probably is going to end up being about 35 or this kind of thing. So 49 is the biggest number you'll ever see under my current system. You take the best team against the worst team, it's going to be 49 is what it's going to put on it. But yeah, that interesting thing about that game you mentioned, Washington Granville, that was week 4. And a 6 touchdown upset after week 1 or 2, that's pretty uncommon. Mm-hmm. Week 1 or 2, all sorts of crazy stuff is going to happen just because the data is not updated. But when you see a big one in mid or late season, that's a little more unusual.
Mm-hmm. And then I really got just one more question for you, and then I'll let Scott ask any last ones that he has. But your state championship probabilities were last updated Thursday morning. Division I, Olentangy, OHSAA Eds. They're kind of the top two. Division II is Avon, Bishop Watterson. Obviously, Avon trying to go for 3 in a row. D3 Ursuline is 38%. D4 Indian Valley and I don't even want to say it. Shelby was tied at 20%. D5 Ironton, Perry, Coldwater. The Tigers 4.7%. And our coach, it's so funny. Our coaches, we all look at this like we have one coach, our D coordinator. I'm going to kind of give Coach A shout. He's a big nerd. As soon as all that's updated, he's on, and him and I were talking about it, and I told him yesterday that I was going to have you on, and then he got real excited because he really does. At the end of the day, it means nothing for us within the realms of our team, but it's just cool. It's fun. It's high school football science to get to look at. Liberty Center D6, and then Marion Local and Hopewell Loudon, kind of the top 2 in D7. Do you have you have your data that shows you, but just what you know about each team? Do you kind of want to give a prediction for all 7 divisions on who you think are winning, or maybe even just the top 2, top 3?
I'm not even going to try to touch it. I got to tell you again where I don't know what anybody's coming back.
Right.
For example, Youngstown Ursuline played 2 games last year before some serious issues in that program forced cancellation of the season. They are ranked based on where they were at the time that happened. I have no idea what's coming back. Has that caused a real shakeup in the school or whatever else? Man, they could be number 1 or they could be number 100 coming out of that. So these kind of things early in the season, I don't even try. Those of y'all that are around the teams and know what everybody's got coming back and so on know a lot more than I do at this stage. My hope is, a month from now, that I'll have a little bit of idea at least.
Okay, I got to ask, since you're into football playoff input systems and predictability and rankings, and you can be as open and honest, and I promise Condoleezza Rice will not come and hunt you down.
We got a big Condoleezza Rice joke around here.
Yeah, it's always. Did the BCS get it right?
In a particular year, which one are you thinking about?
Was it just a good model? Did it work? Do you think it kind of slighted some other schools, teams, conferences?
Yeah,
or...
you know what?
Let me add this. Should the BCS rankings be used to determine a 4-team or 12-team college football playoff model?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent to that. I think there's things that there's going to be strengths and weaknesses over in either case. I mean, I remember I was in college in the mid '90s. I was an undergrad at Florida in the days when Steve Spurrier was down there. Boy, that was a lot of fun too in those days. But you know, you look at, right, for any of your younger listeners in the '80s and the '90s, you've got maybe Nebraska's number one and they're going to the Orange Bowl, and USC's number two and they're going to the Rose Bowl to play OSU, who's number three, and then Alabama wins the SEC and they're going to the Sugar Bowl, and that's it, right? You've got three potential national champions. None of them are going to play each other. Just the thing about the BCS to me that was great is when you had no playoff, a two-team playoff was a big improvement. Gee, at least we can try to get whoever that we think the two best teams are in the country to play each other at the end of the year. So regardless of what you did, yeah, that's a step forward. I happen to know one of the BCS ranking folks, Ken Massey, who still runs a big all-sport kind of prediction website. It was a nice step forward for the '90s. Whether you do something more like March Madness with a committee, or you've got some sort of computer ranking plus automatic bids, I don't have a huge issue one way or the other in that. I think there are pros and cons to both. Where things went off the rails is in the system of the coaches polls, where you could have some real benefit to doing strange things. If it's real clear there's three top teams in the country and one of the coaches who's got a dog in the fight ranks one of them number 14, right, that's you got a problem there. So there's never going to be a perfect system. There's always going to be arguments to be had of, gee, this team really should have gotten in. Miami was a bubble team last year. And you look at what they did in the playoffs, or the undefeated FSU team the year before that, as much as I hate the Seminoles, right? Whatever it might be, there's always going to be those kinds of things and questions of what do you do with the team that goes 12-0 out of one of the minor conferences and didn't play anybody all year, versus the team that was 9-3 and they played three top 10 opponents and six of the top 25. Yeah, those are going to be, that's a no-win situation at some level. You've got to make a decision ultimately one way or another, but there's a lot of reasonable things that can be done.
Mm-hmm. Are you a Florida Gators fan, number one, or have you been in Ohio long enough to where you're a Buckeye through and through? You got North Carolina roots. Like, where's your allegiance lie in college football?
Yeah, a little bit
in
of
NFL,
all three of those. A little bit of all three, honestly. I have been an NC State guy since childhood. I got an academic scholarship to Florida and spent 5 great years down there doing my math degree and my athletic training certification and so on. So I love my Gators when an SEC football is fun to watch. And as like the old T-shirt says, my kid and my money go to Ohio State. So it's my son's involved in Block O, the big student pep group down there, and I've been down to a few games. Thankfully, they play in 3 different conferences, so that's on any given Saturday. Usually three games in 2 different time slots if I can catch them. And then, of course, locally, I work at an NCAA Division III school, high academic kind of place. I love the purity of the D3 game, honestly. There's no athletic scholarships. We've got athletes that are going on to be doctors and lawyers and business leaders and up for the NCAA postgraduate scholarship. In fact, we've won more of those in the last 10 years than the whole Ivy League. So it's a lot of fun being at a place where it's a different type of environment too. But when the bagpipers lead the team to charge down the hill, like something out of Braveheart, it is its own fun environment on autumn Saturdays here. And so I enjoy all of the above, honestly. The NFL, I grew up watching the Redskins with my grandmother on TV. I don't follow it as closely, honestly. After Friday nights and Saturdays, by Sunday, like I need a day off from getting out from in front of the TV and, go to church, maybe get out and play 9 holes of golf with my younger son or this kind of thing. And so I am, maybe something that has to do with the Browns being our local team here, right? That you question your life choices if you spend 17 Sunday afternoons watching them. But
depressed.
Speaking of college football, one more college football for you. Question real quick. Do you have a national champion that you want to give?
Boy, it's tough to say at this point in the season. I don't know that I want to get into that. Love to see the Buckeyes do it again, but
I'd love to.
Wait till week 7 or 8, halfway through the season, he'll be able to predict it.
I do have one more question, just kind of because it kind of all talked about you talked some March Madness and stuff. Have you ever thought about taking your model and doing Ohio high school basketball? I know that I think it's Martin RPI has kind of begun to do a little bit, but it's just nowhere as in depth as what you have, and just I love the your winning streaks, losing streaks. We always look at like the best team performances, and then best like all that stuff, all your extra stuff that you have on it. Have you thought about going to the college basketball or the Ohio high school basketball realm with this at all?
yeah, I have. I moved here in 2008, and I think it was about 2010. People started asking me, "So when are you going to do basketball? When are you going to do basketball?" Well, there's kind of three reasons why I don't. Number one, the practical one is that I tell people is, look, with what's involved in football season, if I did this all through basketball season too, my wife would kill me.
Yes.
So there's that, right? The family side of that. Number two is, again, I depend on Joe Idle to get all the scores, and when there's a once a week regular rhythm to high school football, that's a lot easier to deal with than even trying to get a hold of the scores for 800 basketball teams that are playing 2 or 3 games a week and irregular schedules. That part's a headache. You can go to some place like Max Preps and that's really trying to keep up with that stuff, and they're still missing or wrong on 20% of the scores. So there's that side of it. And the third one is about 4 years ago, I got involved in high school wheelchair basketball. I don't know if y'all are familiar with this at all, but through Adaptive Sports Ohio, a nonprofit, there is a high school wheelchair basketball league. There's going to be about 16 teams this year. And it's a neat mix of kids with physical disabilities and able-bodied kids. I mean, there's some schools put in senior football players. They can only have so many kids without disabilities on the court at the given time or this kind of thing. They're limited to 6 points apiece. But it was something really cool and different that I got involved in. I do the PA announcing for their state tournament, along with for Worcester High for the wheelchair team and the girls team. And so it's been something meaningful and a little different that keeps me busy during high school basketball season.
That's awesome. Scott, any last questions?
Yeah, I agree with Drew. I mean, I get a lot of people ask about like, hey, why don't you, and Brian always asks like, hey, can you do more, basketball games for OH report and stuff during the season? I'm like, football's nice. It's once a week. The basketball, it's just, it's constant. It's every day of the week. And it's like, man, I can't do that. That's just, so I'll do some when I can, or, after, once we get into the winter season and stuff like that, and I'll have to do a bunch of stuff outside on the farm, I got a little bit more time and I can try and make that, weather pending and stuff. So, yeah, you're right, Drew. I get it. And actually, my dad, who you saw walk through here, he's a retired educator, and I'm an educator. And one of the things he told me when I first started teaching, he said, Scott, you can do whatever you want coaching-wise. He said, but my best advice is don't coach basketball. He said, don't coach basketball. He said, season's way too long. It's every day. Just don't do it. And yeah, so it is a different animal.
Yeah, I had to learn that lesson the hard way. When I started out at 22 years old coaching, I was teaching a full load of math classes, and I was the head athletic trainer for a school that'd be like D2 sized up here. And so we had, I think, 29 teams, including varsity and JV. Right, there's a home game almost every night of the week. Now, we don't play on Saturdays and Sundays down there. Maybe the wrestling team was off at a tournament or something. You truly did get your weekend off. Maybe the football coaches were getting together Sunday evening to review film. But by the time we got to Friday night, I'd already put in 70 hours a week during football season and probably 55 during the rest of the year. It was just more than I could handle for the long term. I was young and single, and you know what? When you're 22 and young and single, you can do it. I remember my AD said my first semester, Drew, it's a good thing you're single. Otherwise, you'd be divorced really soon. And right, a few years later, I met my wife, and it was recognizing, can I do this now? Yes. Can I do it for the next 30 years? Probably not. and so made a change to something that's a little more realistic. I've been a department chair at Worcester and just rotated out of that after 7 years. And do I work more hours than I probably ought to sometimes? Yeah, I think anybody that cares about their job probably does sometimes. But I know what y'all. I appreciate our teachers and coaches and the work that goes into that and the impact it makes on young student athletes' lives. I've been where you sit and appreciate that side of it. But yeah, you can't do it all year round. It's too much.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we appreciate you for coming on here and joining us for a good almost 50 minutes now. Galleon Tigers we are always open. I always got a spot on the sideline for you if you ever want to work it out, whether it's a regular season game or hopefully for us this year a playoff game. I hope that we've made you a fan of the Tigers, and we just again really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for giving us some really good insights just how all this works. My last thing, I know it's not your fault. I know it's all the data and all the input you had, but this is for Coach Hay, our defense coordinator. We beat Perkins head-to-head last year in Week 12 of the playoffs, and they still, in better regular season, better record. The only loss was to state runner-up Shelby, and we finished below him in the overall rankings. Coach Hay, just that's for you.
I hear you.
He wanted to just be above him. For us. I've been a part of Galleon football for a long time. I played obviously my 4 years, and I've been coaching now for 8th. I've been part of a lot of games. That game last year, I talk about all the time to anybody. Our game versus Perkins was the most fun I've ever had in a high school football environment, and that is what high school football is all about. I know a lot of schools are losing freshman teams, losing JV teams. You just had a tweet about the second team in Ohio that is not doing football this year. I want our kids that aren't playing football to go to those games and see the environment, and I just wonder how you could not be a part of it because it was the greatest night of high school football in Ohio, in Galleon, Ohio, since the 1985 state championship. That's how great of a game it was. So
that's terrific. I will tell you in that spirit too of one of the things I'd really like to see happen. Right, some of these schools are dropping in enrollment. There are, with more sports and more other things going on, it's tougher to get guys out for football. Not everybody wants to come out and get screamed at in the heat and all of that, right? I started high school at 80 pounds. Maybe I could have been the football, but the realities being what they are, some of that stuff. I really wish the OHSAA would go ahead and sanction 8-man football, and let's have an 8-man division for some of those D7 and maybe even some of the current D6 schools that are going to struggle for the numbers that are needed there. I think that would go a long way toward being able to preserve the sport in some of these smaller districts and communities.
Yeah, well, they already did it with girls flag football and stuff. Why not do 8-man football? Mm-hmm. Yeah, do it right. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for having me on.
Drew, awesome. Yeah,
thank
awesome
you.
Stuff, Drew.
And good luck to y'all this season at Galleon.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.